to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about something that I'm actually kind of nervous to talk about. The entity that I am going to talk about today probably should not honestly be talked about because it is scary, and the stories that I've read during my research are they're affecting me a lot more than like just normal paranormal stories about ghosts and spirits and stuff. So today what I'm going to be talking about are skinwalkers. And skinwalker is a term that I learned when I was about 18, I think. So it's been about 5 or 6 years. But the story that was told to me about a skinwalker was so deeply disturbing because it was unlike anything that I had ever heard before. So I'll kind of give like a little summary about that story, and then I'm going to go into some facts about skinwalkers, and then I'm going to read off a couple of really interesting and really creepy stories that I found about skinwalkers. So the story that I was told by an old friend, and it apparently happens in Wyoming. My research about skinwalkers tells me that skinwalkers are exclusive to the Southwest because they come from Navajo folklore. So I don't even know if skinwalkers technically can exist in Wyoming. I know that skinwalkers get confused with shapeshifters, other entities like that. I could be wrong, but anyway, so here's the story. So basically, somewhere in Wyoming there is this cliff, and this cliff always has this cow on it. What happens if you drive to this cliff at night and you see this cow and you look it in the eyes, it will possess you to like drive off the cliff and kill yourself. The cow is a skinwalker, and it changes from a man to a cow, and it possesses you to kill yourself. So that was like unlike any sort of paranormal story that I had heard before, and this was when I was like deep into experiencing the paranormal activity at my old house, and this disturbed me on such a level that I've never felt before, so I've pretty much stayed away from it. However, I've been getting into Reddit a lot lately, and I found a subreddit that is for people who have had experiences with skinwalkers. Now I've been more interested in learning more about what skinwalkers are, the tales behind them, where it originated. So I did some research, and basically what I've come up with is that skinwalkers begin as humans, and basically these humans are witches who have these powers and eventually become corrupt, and they want to use their powers for evil. So basically, when a witch decides they want to become a skinwalker, they're like inducted into this secret society, and they have to undergo these rituals that basically corrupt their humanity and give them the power to change between a person and an animal. Mainly what people see when they encounter skinwalkers, the type of animals that they see are coyotes, wolves, foxes, cougars, dogs, and bears, but it can apparently take the shape of whichever kind of animal that they want to. The Navajo are very, very, very superstitious about even talking about skinwalkers. They consider it very taboo to talk about them, to acknowledge them. Even if you have had an experience with them, they tell you to just not talk about it, because just talking about a skinwalker can actually bring their attention to you. And if you have had an encounter with a skinwalker, it can make them more attentive towards you. Another thing about the Skinwalkers is that they can possess you if you look directly into their eyes. So if you do ever come across a Skinwalker, do not look them in the eyes. Once you realize that they're a Skinwalker, you should just stop even looking at them and get as far away from them as possible. A common thing that happens when people come across Skinwalkers is that there are a couple of telltale things that will happen. They will make certain sounds such as screaming it's not completely human, but it's also not completely animal. They'll knock on your windows, they'll rummage around your house, they'll look in your windows even if your windows are open. So if you suspect that there's a Skinwalker outside, close your windows and stay away from them for the rest of the night. They can run fast, they can jump very high, their stamina is very, very high, which is why a lot of encounters that people talk about happen in their car, and the Skinwalkers can keep up with the car, and that's why, is because they can run fast and they have a very, very high endurance. Skinwalkers are also apparently able to bring misfortune upon people. Things such as paranoia, sickness, just general misfortune, unluckiness can happen to an individual who has been targeted by a Skinwalker, and apparently people can enlist the help of a Skinwalker to exact revenge on their enemies, whoever that might be, for whatever reason. They are also seemingly immune to anything that would kill a normal person, such as shooting them. And the only way to kill a Skinwalker is to say the name that they had before they turned into a Skinwalker. So going back to the Skinwalker subreddit that I've been frequenting lately, I found some stories that fascinated me and also really, really, really creeped me out, that really started my feelings, like kind of reconsidering if I should make this video, because I'm just feeling generally uneasy now. But I'm gonna go ahead and read them off. I'll also leave links to their stories below if you want to read them for yourself, or if you want to browse the subreddit as well. So the first story that I'm going to read is about a guy who started looking into Skinwalkers, and he said that he began to feel paranoid, which is something that people do tend to experience when they are targeted by a Skinwalker. So he says, "It started out with a standard creepy feeling and I brushed it off, as I'm used to dealing with other paranormal experiences. For about 3 weeks, the dog in my neighbor's backyard would go crazy, lasting for about 2 to 3 hours, to the point where it creeped me out enough that I wouldn't go out to smoke alone anymore. One night in late August, I was outside with my roommate and we were smoking a few cigarettes, just shooting the shit, and the dog was going crazy again. Suddenly, she stopped dead in her tracks and just stared at the tree next to the doghouse. Naturally, I questioned it. My roommate told me that it looked like there was a person standing in the tree, walking along the branches close to the top, just kind of staring our way. That in and of itself was terrifying, considering everything I read, but I didn't see anything and figured maybe she imagined it. Until the next morning, when she got up for work and said there was a dog that neither of us had seen before sitting next to her car. She said it stared at her, snarling for a really long time before it took off. There were also handprints on the outside glass of my window underneath the screen." Now, the next two stories I want to read are from the same user, and again, I will link the stories down below if you want to read them yourself. But this person, from what I can gather, I think they said they were Navajo, or their family was, and their family has told them these stories, and then they were kind enough to type them up on the subreddit. The name of the series is Skinwalker Stories from the Past, and the first one reads, "My cousin lived in the eastern agency of the Navajo Nation in a community known as Crown Point. She was still living with her parents at this time and was a good girl. She had good grades, a nice ride, and was a very popular girl that played on the basketball team. When she told us this story, it was very out of the ordinary, and the events that followed would also deepen my beliefs in the traditional Navajo way and of the taboos associated with the Navajo culture. My cousin was coming home from basketball practice, which ran past sunset. It was during the colder months, and so it was dark by the time she pulled into her neighborhood. She pulled into the small housing community that she lived in. It was far from a fenced community, but there were street lights, and the neighbors weren't far from each other. As she neared her home, she saw a group of dogs. This wasn't unlikely, as there were random packs of stray dogs that roam rural communities. These dogs don't belong to anyone, and they get food where they can get it. As she got closer, she noticed something was off about the dogs. There were 4 of them, and they were sitting in a circle all facing each other. This didn't really faze her until she spoke about it later. Because this was a housing community, my cousin couldn't barrel down the road, so she slowly drove past the group of dogs and kept going on her way. As she continued to drive, she noticed in her peripheral vision that something was running alongside her car. She turned her head to see that a brown dog from the group was trotting alongside her car. She didn't mind much until she hit a strategically placed speed bump. The impact of the bump made her entire car wobble. She looked over at the dog again, still casually keeping pace with the car. She tried to ignore the dog and tried speeding up, keeping in mind where the speed bumps were placed. The dog continued to keep pace. My cousin had to eventually stop at a stop sign. She began to feel immensely uncomfortable and tried to keep her eyes forward, but curiosity got the best of her. She looked over at the dog. It was facing forward. She continued to stare, and that is when the dog turned its head. Instead of the face of a dog, there was a flat face of a man covered in hair, smiling from ear to ear. Fear shot through her body, and my cousin pushed the pedal to the floor, not daring to look back in her rearview mirror. She reached her house and barely pulled herself into the door, weak from fear. My aunt came to her, and my cousin began to sob. She told my aunt everything, and they scheduled a meeting with the medicine man the next day. That night, my cousin was trying to get some rest. She was tossing and turning and felt very ill. She could hear people outside laughing and talking in Navajo, but she didn't think too much of it because they lived in a community near plenty of neighbors. At the medicine man, he told my cousin that she was very fortunate. The Skinwalker wasn't meant for her. She just happened to spot it while it was out to bring another person misfortune. He also told her that the laughing and talking she had heard the night before was the Skinwalker talking to his friends, letting them know that somebody saw him and he had scared her. The medicine man told my cousin that if the Skinwalker had been for her and she had seen him like that, it would have very well killed her. After that encounter, my cousin suffered from many ailments and had to stop playing basketball for a while. She had many ceremonies and eventually got back on her feet. My mom told us this story on the many nights that the electricity went out. When I asked my cousin about it, she confirms it's true but doesn't like talking about it much. So the last story I'm going to read more interested me than anything. It's still really freaky, but it was very, very interesting. So it says, there's a small community called Church Rock that is a few miles outside of Gallup, New Mexico. Many of the people that have lived here have passed the land down many generations. This is where our story begins, 2 generations ago. There is a woman that was infatuated with a man in her community. She requested that the man build her a home. In exchange, she would give her daughter to the man to serve as his maid. The woman thought that as the man worked on her home, she could woo him in the process. The deal was sealed, and the man built the woman a house. The man collected his payment, but instead of having the daughter as a maid, he married her. The mother became enraged with jealousy and ran the newly married couple out of the community. The couple relocated to Rama and started a new life. They had 6 children, 2 of which were twin girls. In the Navajo tradition, twins are seen as very powerful. In the mythology of Navajos, the children of the sun were twins, and so they are held to a very high regard. This is a story from one of those twin girls. The family began construction on the new home. When they were building the house, the children would play outside as the adults worked. As they were playing, the older twin noticed an animal emerge from the woods. It was a coyote. Usually coyotes are very skittish and avoid humans at any cost. The coyote made its way closer to the girl. A strange smell filled the air, like something dead. The coyote came right up to her. She said the coyote didn't bite her, but instead put its mouth on her mouth and began to suck the breath from her. It was at this point that she lost consciousness. One of the adults that was working on the house saw what was happening, and everyone rushed towards the coyote and the girl. The adults yelled and shouted as they ran towards them. The coyote darted back into the woods, and the girl fell to the ground. She was blue. The family worked fast and were able to resuscitate her. The incident resulted in the family going to see a medicine man. He told them that it was the grandmother, still harboring jealous feelings towards her own daughter and her family. They had a prayer done and thought that was the end of it. Later, the family received news that the grandmother had died. As the years passed, construction on the home continued and the girls continued to grow. The family had built the first story of their home and moved in. The twin sisters shared a bedroom and slept together on a king-sized bed. It was a hot summer night and the family kept all the windows open to keep their rooms cold during the night. One night, the older twin arose to use the restroom. The family kept a small light on in the hallway. She got out of bed, walked down the hallway, and did her business. She returned to bed. As she was covering herself, she happened to look up. She froze in horror. There at the window was a coyote, its eyes shining from the hallway light. The window was pretty high, so the coyote had to be standing on its rear legs. The girl was frozen with fear and made complete eye contact with the coyote. It was then that she noticed that same smell, the smell of death. She snapped and ran out of the room screaming and crying. She ran to her parents' room and got her father. He ran into the bedroom, half expecting it to be a figment of his daughter's imagination. But the strong smell hit him, and there was the coyote still standing at the window. The father yelled and ran to get his rifle. The family tried to comfort the little girl, but she sobbed until morning. Again, the family sought out the medicine man. He explained to the family that the hatred that the grandmother had for the family was so strong that the ill intentions that she had for the couple and their family preceded even their grandmother's death. When the family was blessed with twins, the grandmother knew of the strength it would bring the family, and so she wanted to get rid of one of them. The older twin recalls these events vividly and swears that the coyote that attempted to suffocate her and the one at her window were one and the same. Even the scent of death was familiar the second time she encountered the creature. She hasn't seen it since that night and is very grateful for that. So those are all the stories and all the information that I could gather about skinwalkers. Me personally, I'm still kind of feeling uneasy talking about this. I've never had an experience with skinwalkers before, so unlike my experiences with paranormal entities and stuff, I can't really say for sure whether or not I believe in skinwalkers, but the experiences of others are very interesting to read nonetheless. And if they are real, I sincerely hope that I never come into contact with them. So anyway, you guys, that's all I have for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.